Happy Birthday, the song, is a huge trigger for kids. So, happy birthday. So, if it's been like a surprise party where happy birthday was shouted, if it's a birthday celebration and everyone's gathered around one person and we're singing this song that no one can sing together and on tune, they're having this big emotional experience around happy birthday, particularly a negative experience. It's not a positive experience. So a lot of times our GLPs are using something like happy birthday to mean that they're scared, right? There is no connection to us unless we do some detective work to know that that happy birthday is meaning I'm scared. Looking at this child and wondering, where is happy birthday in what we're playing right here, right? So they've learned this bigger chunk. And what they have to do is break that apart.
I'm Rachel.
And I'm Jessica, and this is All Things Sensory by Harkla.
We are both certified occupational therapy assistants, and together with Harkla, we are on a mission to empower parents, therapists, and educators to help raise confident and strong children of all abilities.
On this podcast, we chat about all things sensory, diving into special needs, occupational therapy, parenting, self-care, overall health and wellness, and so much more.
We are here to provide raw, honest, and fun strategies, ideas, and information for parents, therapists, and educators, as well as other professionals to implement into daily life.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey there, welcome back to All Things Sensory by Harkla. We are so happy to have you here today for another fantastic interview.
We are chatting with Amy Whelan. She is a speech-language pathologist. She is the speech therapist that I work with in the clinic, and we're so excited to have her on to talk about collaboration, GLPs, and so much more.
Let's jump in and meet Amy.
Hi, Amy. Welcome to All Things Sensory.
Hello, nice to be here.
We are happy to have you.
We start all of our interviews with 5 secret questions.
Jeez.
I knew you would love it.
Okay, what's one hobby you've always wanted to start but haven't yet?
Oh gosh, there's a lot of those too. I think it would be heliski.
What? Okay.
It's something that my husband and my daughter would really like to do, and I am fair conditions, skier, blue skies, nice groomed runs. But I think it would be so fun to, be dropped in all of the powder and be that good to be able to manage.
Whew, I was going to say, are you that good? Because that's impressive.
Sounds terrifying.
It is terrifying. We could start with cat skiing first and go in,
It's a good one.
Yeah.
Work your way up.
Yes.
If you could switch lives with one person for a day, who would it be?
I think right now, this is kind of a silly answer, but my daughter, she is a senior in high school and she's doing all of the end of year things. She is so confident in herself and her abilities across the board. No matter what it is. Lacrosse, I'm fantastic. School, my teachers love me. They want me to be in their class. I'm so good at my test. I didn't even have to study. My friends love me too. To just be able to sit in that unadulterated positivity and enjoyment of everything in my life and not be so jaded and tired and old, sounds really, really fun.
I love that. I wonder how she got to be so confident.
She's been like that her entire life. She is the kid. My older one is the one who wanted mom to come and needed mom to be by her in doing the things. For Chloe, I'm just the celery for the dip. She's you are the condiment or the conduit to get me to whatever it is, and then I'll take over from there and be the fun thing.
Love that. Oh my goodness. That's so fun. All right. Would you rather have Mexican food or Italian food for the rest of your life?
Okay, so I am Italian, but I would take Mexican food hands down.
Okay. How do we ask that one?
Yeah, that worked really well. All right, last question, last secret question. What is your sensory quirk?
Oh, chewing ice. Any of those. Loud eating, crunching. And
Okay.
my kids also will attest to this. Straws, like going in and out of the cup. So like when they were little and we would have a drink in the car and it'd be like, and I'm like, oh my gosh, stop.
So some auditory ones.
Yes.
Okay.
Misophonia,
A little
specifically.
bit. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay, now that everyone knows your deepest, darkest secrets, tell us a little bit about yourself, your career, what you specialize in before we jump in.
So I have been a speech therapist for almost 30 years. My career has been pretty much the same since I started. When I started so long ago, family-centered therapy and interdisciplinary teams were just like starting out. We were starting to have the research about that. We were exploring different avenues for how to best serve our kids. I've always been in pediatrics. I always say I did a rotation in a SNF, and it's one thing to have kids spit or throw food at you. It's another thing entirely to have very frustrated adults spit and throw food at you because you have had to pour milk on their roll and they really didn't want that. So peds has always been my thing. I also worked in academia for a long time, but generally have done pediatric work in private practice for my entire career. And it is the best. I can't imagine doing anything differently. Even when I start to get burnt out and think about what other avenue I would like to explore, there's just no other.
That's how I feel too. One of the things that happens often is I talk about you a lot on the podcast, actually. You're Amy, the speech therapist that I work with. I love you. I love that you collaborate with all of us OT practitioners in the clinic where we work. And so that's one of the things we wanted to talk about was the benefits of collaboration between speech, OT, and any other, profession that is helping the child.
Well, I think our clinic is very unique. I will say that first. And as the lone outsider speech therapist here, I wondered what it would be like to work with 5 OTs and kind of like in my own little orbit. And it has proven to be hands down the best place I have ever worked as far as collaboration. So interprofessional collaboration is something that I think is very important. And one of the unique things about our clinic is that it is true interprofessional collaboration practice, meaning that we are all looking at our kids together and their strengths and their challenges and figuring out how to support them, not only as the children that we're seeing therapeutically, but their families as well. What I was taught so many years ago about collaboration is that a parent, stranger, should be able to walk in to your therapy session and not be able to tell who the speech therapist is, who the occupational therapist is, who the physical therapist is, right? And really, when I was trained in the beginning, we did actually arena therapy. It was all the professions were together with 1 or 2 kids and working on all things simultaneously. And that has changed over time for sure, and probably mostly due to billing issues and how we can provide therapy. But I really think that shows that there is true collaboration when we can seamlessly move between children and therapists. And it really doesn't look all that difference. That's not to say that I, as the speech therapist, know all of the OT things. But what I do know is that I can recognize when my child is either emotionally or having sensory dysregulation, and that I need to adjust what I am doing in my therapeutic session, and that I know how to do that because I've watched the other therapists work with that child, or I've had a conversation about that child to support them, so that when they're with me in speech, they're getting the same kinds of supports. It only makes my session more successful. It never is detrimental to what we are doing. And there is a joke in our clinic that I am the toileting queen, because I don't know how many children I take to the bathroom, and it's not one of those things that I can say, can you wait until OT because they want to work on that. It falls to me. And so it is kind of funny because, like, we don't just go in there and go potty and be done. We do all of the OT things as well.
Yeah, I love that. I think too, for anyone who's thinking of like an example of this would be Jessica's working with a client who benefits from swinging to regulate their nervous system. The child's going to go to the speech session next, and she can say, this kiddo is really enjoying swinging. I noticed more communication from them. You could include that in your session, or maybe try that, and then, make sure you follow it with heavy work, so she can kind of, provide those little simple strategies, so that way the child doesn't get dysregulated afterwards. And I think that's kind of that prime example of, like, we're not just going to sit down, do our rote, our tick activities. It's like, how can we make this session the most beneficial for the entire body, the entire child, rather than just like one little aspect. And so for people who are listening, like, how do you collaborate? Do you just talk about what works, what doesn't work? Or are you like watching their session a little bit and then, talking about, oh, hey, that works really well. Let me try doing that. Do you have any tips?
Well, I think there is a little bit of that when we're transitioning, talking about what went well in the previous, like the OT session for me, and how to incorporate that. Equally as important is what didn't work well and what went off the rails, so that I am also aware, like, this really didn't go well, like, tread carefully in this area. I think a lot of it too, and again, this is really a testament to the people that I work with. I don't know that this would be true in all environments, but we're kind of in and out of everybody's session, whether they want it to be that way or not. So for example, and Jessica is wonderful at this, and she really has taken suggestions that I have made very much to heart. Like, it makes me so happy when I hear her doing things that I have said or we've talked about. And that is, for example, and this just stands out to me because I was so scared to tell Jessica this in the moment when it happened. But with our GLP...
She is quite intimidating.
With our GLP kids...
I know exactly what you're going to say.
The big thing is don't ask questions. And she was doing great sitting at a table. I think they were having a snack. And she was working on that connection and engagement with this kiddo, right? And we know regulation, connection, engagement, communication, right? Like, that's how we get there. I can see this. It was beautiful, her engagement, but she was asking question after question. And I just, like, it just came out of my mouth. Stop asking questions! Like, it was, like, such a big thing. Because, like, and she wasn't asking the questions also, like, to get an answer, because if he could have answered her, he would have answered her. It was that way of thinking that this is how we're going to get engagement. If I ask you, you will respond, right? And so she took it so well. I felt terrible saying it, but for the next few sessions after that with different people, I could hear her say, "Oh gosh, I'm not supposed to ask you a question," right? And so that was a very obnoxious way for me to say something, to apologize even a year later that like I probably could have handled that much better. But again, that's a testament to where we work and kind of that being able to communicate freely about what we're seeing with each other. Not only the don't do that, but you're doing that really well. And again, I'll use Jessica because she's sitting here. One thing that I love about Jessica is she is a really good example of embracing silence. So in speech therapy, like it seems like we should be taught to talk, right? Like we want to get these kids to talk and we need to model for them and they need to know what language looks like and we need to ask them questions so they can answer us and on and on. But one of the best things that we can do for our kids is offer them silence. Because in that silence, especially for our kids who might have some forms of dyspraxia, verbal dyspraxia, even motor dyspraxia if they have AAC, giving them prolonged periods of silence is so good for them. So good. There's so much communication that can happen in silence that if we're talking over it, we miss, especially for our autistic kiddos. Their signs of communication can be so subtle that if we're so in tune to like what I'm thinking and what I'm saying, we've missed their part of the circle of communication.
So true. And it's funny that you say that. I do that because I also notice you doing that all the time too, which, you would think as a speech therapist, you would be talking with these kids all the time or communicating with them through their AAC all the time. But there is so much like silence in sessions that is so beneficial, like you said. And I just think that that's something you also do well. I mean, we might as well just keep complimenting each other back and forth this whole interview. Thank you so much. And it's funny about that story because I knew exactly which story you were going to tell, yelling at me down the hallway while I was in the kitchen. And I love that because it's an example of two people who work together who have built trust with each other. And we value each other's opinions. And so it wasn't even a situation where I was like, oh, Amy telling me what to do again. It was like, oh yeah, duh, Jessica, stop asking questions. And so having that trust with other professionals, I think is so important so that you can work together in a way that is helpful for your clients, because that's really what it's about, is helping these kids and helping them communicate, helping them build skills, helping them with regulation. And you can't do that if you don't have a good relationship with the other professionals that are working with the child.
And that's funny because on my little list of notes of things, trust is in all caps. Because I think that's very to the point, because the other part of that is that we're just not collaborating professionally, and I have to trust each of you innately because the other people that we are communicating with are the families, right? And they have to trust us too. And if we as therapists are so far apart in our approaches or our communication styles with the families, or don't have shared knowledge, if I'm operating in my speech bubble and everyone else is operating in their OT bubble, and we can't speak a common language to the families, our services are very just sequential in our own little places I'm not in my therapy office very often, but in our therapy office, right? We're not engaging. And I really see the importance of what that looks like to our families, and to be able to say to them, here was my experience of sensory or emotional or gross motor, or even in speech, we were working on pencil grasp, right? Like, those things were happening in my session. If you have further questions, follow up with Jessica or Megan or whoever your OT is. And the same thing, trying to debrief the OTs, like at our transition, hey, here's what happened in speech, because if they're debriefing the family, then they feel like empowered to talk about those things. But also because we've had numerous conversations as a team about these kids and, again, their strengths and their challenges. And I cannot discount how important the family is to our professional team. Because if we don't have parent buy-in, if we're alienating families by the way we're talking to them, which means sometimes if we're not also addressing strengths, I always want to be able to tell my families, hey, this is the good thing that happened in therapy today, because parents know they hear the challenges all of the time across the board, school, friends, just out in the community, right? They know what their kids' challenges are. And I think it's important to give them feedback that there are a lot of good things that we see even when we're growing and developing, right? There are still so many strengths that they bring to the table. And I guess I am super sensitive to how families are feeling, because it's hard. They come to me and they tell me how hard it is. So I believe that the families are the experts on their child, and I am the expert on speech and language to help support that. And I'm lucky to have an OT team behind me that also can add to that conversation.
Yeah.
I want to circle back a little bit to the conversation of building trust between professionals. And I just think that it is so important to establish that open, just team approach between one another. I mean, I've worked with plenty of professionals who, if I give them a piece of advice or, hey, try this, like kind of like what you did to Jessica, they almost feel like it's me telling them that they're not doing a good job or they're not doing it right. So if you could teach a therapist listening some strategies on how to share and accept professional communication back and forth when you're working with a client, I mean, what would you say? How would you help a therapist learn to build trust like that?
Again, I would yell down the hallway, stop doing that. No.
Yes, which I think is great. And you have that, that element of humor and kind of joking back and forth. But, some people would take that the wrong way.
No, for sure.
Which is
for
tough.
sure. And again, this was very early on in my knowing Jessica. So there was a lot of trepidation in that approach, right? But I think a lot of it is starting in in the silence and the listening, right? Listening to what other therapists are saying, not even at like the constructive criticism part of things, but listening to what other therapists are saying about what is challenging or something that really, really went well. I mean, I feel like we have more days where we feel like our hair is on fire and things have gone off the rails a lot than the days where we've had a really big win. And I think that in building a therapy team kind of goes back to that sitting in silence and listening to what everyone else is saying. Because in that, you learn other therapists' strengths also, and their communication styles, and kind of even what's important to them. Also, again, I'm a 1 and they're a 5. So they all come with different training and approaches, right? And so for me, that's kind of trial by fire. Like, that's a lot of different people to learn from and to sit, again, and be willing to listen to what they have to say. Even those, like the debriefs between when we're passing off kids, I have learned so much in that is what has allowed me to feel comfortable, because there's vulnerability in that. There's vulnerability in coming in and saying, this was terrible. Like, I don't know what we accomplished today. Like, our accomplishment was that we stayed regulated, right? There is a huge vulnerability in that. And so I think acknowledging that is really important. And I know that I feel acknowledged too. And again, I don't have very many like speech sound only kids. I don't think I have any kids anymore that are speech only. All of my kids get OT too. So I'm sharing a lot with others. I am not operating kind of in my own little space working on ours. So there's so much to learn. I mean, with 40 kids, there's so much to learn when we're sharing back and forth. And like I said, it's just a testament to the team here too, because I also feel listened to. Like I said, like, do they care how we are doing on ours? Probably not, but I know that they care about how successful our session was, what made it successful, what we need next. Like, we've been sitting for a while, or we were working on something that's really tricky and it's a huge trigger, and so we need to switch now to something different that's more sensory based play. So it's funny because I was looking back, there's a kiddo I've seen for 3 years, and I was looking back at her mom sent me one of the initial videos from our therapy sessions, and I was like, oh my God, take that off the internet. Like, this is terrible.
Oh, no.
And it was at her, she was diagnosed with autism very early, like 18 months, which is kind of unheard of, right? And we were doing therapy, and she was in like a big laundry basket, and I was on the outside, and she wanted the toys that I had, and I was doing the modeling, the signing help, and more, and she was reaching for the toys, and I pulled back, and I was like, oh my gosh, never in a million years would I do that now. And also, never would I sign the same, like it was terrible. But it's that kind of thing, like I said, know better, do better. And that's honoring my own mistake, being willing to share it and say, hey, we all can do better. I'm not speaking to you from this place of I know everything, and my practice has definitely evolved and continues to, because there's just so much to know.
Well, I think if you're not evolving and you're not learning from your mistakes, then what's the point of being a therapist? You know, if you continue to do the same thing over and over again and you're realizing, or maybe you're not even realizing it's not working, go to a different profession. Like, we have to be able, I love seeing videos of like myself when I'm treating, so I can hear, oh geez, Rachel, you were talking too much, you know, like pause more. And like, it's so helpful to have that feedback of what your body language is doing, what your affect is doing, what your tone of voice is doing. Are you talking too fast? Are you talking too slow? Are you moving too fast? And when you can see yourself treating, you can be your biggest critic and be like, this is what I need to do going forward. You know, like, it's honestly, I think it should be a part of like professional continuing education, you know, like your boss should take videos of everyone and sit down and say, okay, what do we like? What can we do better? What's working? What's not working? Because when we can see it from the outsider's perspective, we're seeing it from like what our kids are seeing and how they're being communicated with too.
Well, it's interesting that you say that also, because I just took some continuing ed that was it was neurodiversity-affirming goals ultimately with regard to feeding therapy. But the initial part of the education was talking about taking from occupational therapy and really talking about, again, professional boundaries And can we take something from occupational therapy? And so now I am writing a goal. It's actually for myself in all of my treatment plans that is that I will continue to use diagnostic therapy to support regulation for learning. And in that way, I'm holding myself accountable for making sure that during our therapy sessions, I am responding well. I am identifying those states of regulation or dysregulation, that I am becoming the safe partner that this child can choose for co-regulation. Because if I'm not doing that, my therapy is not evolving either, right? I'm just focusing on my goals.
Just going through the motions almost. Yeah, absolutely.
Love.
Hold ourselves accountable. That's true.
Yes. Okay, let's sidestep a little bit into GLPs. Again, Jessica rants and raves about how much she's learned from you when it comes to Gestalt language processors.
Don't ask questions.
Step one, don't ask questions. Can you just give us a little background, a little intro 101 on GLPs and kind of that avenue?
Sure. So babies, we think of as parents in general. Society thinks of, we learn language one word at a time, right? Like babies start with mama and dada, and then they start pointing at things and naming those items or objects or people. And they build 2 words, 3 words till we get to a sentence. Well, many of our kids don't learn language that way. And they actually learn language big and have to break it down into those 1-word units. So for our Gestalt language processors who are going through natural language acquisition as opposed to analytical language acquisition, they have to go through 2 extra stages of language acquisition because they are starting with what we call gestalts. So they have both a cognitive gestalt and a linguistic gestalt, usually paired together. So the words that they're saying are based on this emotional feeling. A classic example, and I actually had a mom say the same example to me this morning. I was like, oh my gosh, like this is, like I hear about it all the time, but I actually had a mom say this morning. Happy birthday. This song is a huge trigger for kids. So, happy birthday. So, if it's been like a surprise party where happy birthday was shouted, if it's a birthday celebration and everyone's gathered around one person and we're singing this song that no one can sing together and on tune, they're having this big emotional experience around happy birthday. Particularly a negative experience. It's not a positive experience. So a lot of times our GLPs are using something like happy birthday to mean that they're scared, right? There is no connection to us unless we do some detective work to know that that happy birthday is meaning I'm scared. We are looking at this child and wondering, like, where is happy birthday in what we're playing right here, right? So they've learned this bigger chunk. And what they have to do is break that apart and mixing and matching those gestalts. Happy birthday is not a great one as far as mix and match, but something like, let's go. Then we want to be able to mix and match to let's go play, let's go swing, right? So we've broken that down a little bit. Once we get to single words, then we can build it back up again into a self-generated grammar. But a lot of this is intonation. I have another little guy that I just did a reeval on. Again, I've been seeing him for 3 years. At the beginning when I saw him, he was 2, largely non-speaking. But I will tell you, the one time he did have words was when he was very emotionally dysregulated. No, 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 no! Just screaming, I don't like it, get me out of here. Like, the rest of the time, silence, but in those moments, those were his words. On his re-eval now, he's starting to form sentences with grammar. Like, he's the first kiddo that I've had long enough to see it go from non-speaking, thinking, oh gosh, he might need AAC, to we have gone through those early stages, we're at those single words, and now we can build sentences. And that is so fun to see, because it's a much longer process generally for these kiddos because of those extra 2 steps.
I just have to say that example of the happy birthday, it like clicked so well for me. Connecting that emotion of feeling scared with the language and them using that happy birthday when they feel scared as a way of communicating. And like, you almost have to put your detective goggles on and be like, what does this mean in this situation? Because in my mind, I have always thought, I mean, this is something so new. Like, we never learned about this when I was in school. And so this is all, newer to me. And my thought is like scripting, and like they hear something from Dora the Explorer, whatever it is, Miss Rachel, and they kind of repeat it in that same tone of voice, whether it's, interacting in an appropriate or an expected situation, or they're like connecting it with that emotion as well. And that just like light bulb, that made so much sense to me.
And it is really hard. The detective work is hard, especially because I'm not with this child 24/7, and sometimes the parents don't even know. And it's funny, I have another little guy. I have 2 examples. He says, it's not a rooster, all of the time. Parents don't know, I don't know, we don't read a rooster book, we don't play, like, those aren't his interests at all. So I have 0 clue what that means, but he is looking at me very expectantly, like, I should know where we're going. Like, I don't know the next step of this conversation except to say, it's not a rooster, and we move right along. So that's an example where I don't know what he means. But one time when we transitioned, because he comes in the morning and then the next day in the afternoon. So when we transitioned in the morning, I had my tumbler. And he said to me, it's my water. And I said, no, it's my coffee. And we went in. The next afternoon, when I went to get him, he said, and I didn't have a cup, it's my coffee, when we went through the door. Didn't have a cup, right? It's that emotional experience. We said this last time, there's something about this that is our transition in that I remember from the time before.
Okay, so where do you go next with that? Like, do you say something different next time? Do you say, let's go in? Or like, how do you address that?
It's always acknowledge and validate. So in that case, since it wasn't true, I didn't have any drink, I say something like, no drink today, or whatever, acknowledging that we were discussing that, and then giving that it's time for let's do exactly that, like helping us move through to the next whatever. I mean, it's our coming in the door routine. We're taking off our shoes and socks, so it doesn't give us a whole huge variety of things to talk about, but again, always important to acknowledge and validate. The same way I say, it's a rooster, or it's not a rooster. And again, don't know where to go with that exactly, but making sure that he is feeling heard and validated. And maybe someday I will know where that rooster or that not a rooster is.
Okay, I have one more question going on top of that. You imitate the tone and their tone when they say that. So if you redirect and you say, not my coffee, let's go to speech. You imitate that same like, ooh, does that make sense?
Yeah. And that is one of the most important things that we can do, especially, so like my little guy that I was talking about that was mostly non-speaking and now is saying lots of things, he still has that intonation pattern for all of his things. So he's not speaking in a sentence that sounds like what you and I would say. There is still so much rise and fall. We call our GLPs intonation babies. They learn the intonation before they learn anything else about language and communication. So those kiddos, which is why also happy birthday is so terrible for them, again, because the experience of people singing happy birthday is not pleasant. Like, it is not an in tune kind of song where people sing at the same time, like, right? It's, and the person might be mom, dad, yes. Like, you know. So those intonation babies, they are going to grab on to that intonation, that melody of speech first. And they are going to use that a lot. And they are so in tune to it in our conversations. Like, I have another little girl who has AAC. One of the buttons on the AAC, like across the standard, is wow, cool. Now, I mean, she has done that button a million bazillion times, and now she's like, wow, cool. And that's the way it is. She's also, it makes me laugh. Again, she's largely non-speaking. Something crashed the other day, and she's like, oh, shit. And it was like, you know, that's an intonation baby. And really, analytic language learners do the same thing. Like, kids, that's what they do. But it's so funny to hear from those non-speaking kids, because you know what they picked up on was that intonation, right? Like, it fits perfectly. And it makes me laugh so much, because it's so fun to go to a debrief and say, like, so she said, oh shit, today.
Love that.
That's good.
So funny. Can you share a couple of tips when working with a Gestalt language processor? We already know number one is don't ask questions. What are a couple of other tips when working with these kids?
Follow the intonation. That's another tip we've learned today. Okay.
Yes. Yep.
Validate.
Yes.
Hit us with more.
So those phrases, again, we call them phrases that can be mitigated. Starting with things like, let's go, time for, right? We can put lots of different things on the end of those. I think not only what we can do, which is all of those things, what we should not be doing is, this is my number one, say mom, say dad. And the reason why, and there are some kids that I have who are older who have had very well-meaning therapists and parents, but now we're stuck because when they go to do something, they say, like, I had this kiddo request Bubbles, say Bubbles, name, like, they're so stuck in their language because they are going to say back what they hear, right? I don't want them ever to say, that's not communication. That's just reverberating what we have said, repeating what we have said to them. Model without expectation. Model with the way that they would be saying something, no matter what it is. And don't say say.
Don't say say. Great. I like it. I do like that. I have heard that one too. And I think that's a great piece of advice of what not to do. We need that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the other thing is that therapy for GLPs, the language therapy, that approach works for everyone. It works for analytic language learners. But the approach for analytic language learners, labeling everything in the environment, pointing and labeling and saying more dogs and want yellow and whatever it may be, that does not work for our GLPs, they will be stuck. I don't want them stuck in single words that they can't build together, because their foundation, like I said, they start with a wall and we break it down. Analytic language learners starts with bricks and builds it up. Our GLPs can get so stuck so that they can't start combining those words. We don't want that for them. We want to give them the big pieces that they can then break down into those single words. That's what's so important.
Yeah, and the model with expectations, I think that's the one that I probably try to use the most with my kids when I'm doing that. So I think that's a good one to take away.
Yeah, and that comes also with the silence. Offer the model and let it be silent, right? Our GLPs will take from us what resonates with them. So that's why it's so tricky, and things like wow, cool, and oh shit for kids who don't have other words are so fun. Something about that resonated with her, right? I don't know what it is, but those are the things that they will take from us. And so we have to be, which is why it's so important to listen to what they're saying or what those intonation patterns are, so we can give them something that fits those contours as well, even if we're making it up.
Was there anything else that we wanted to add on to that?
I think this has been great. I've learned so much. You are a wealth of knowledge. I understand Jessica's love for you. It all makes sense now.
It's been a fun ride with these OTs here. Like I said, it's the first time that I've been outnumbered, but there's so much to learn, and I really hope, again, that our families here feel supported by the entire team. And I think I am constantly surprised. Jessica in particular says this to me, like, I've never met a speech therapist like you. I've never met a speech therapist like you. And I don't feel so odd, because this is the only way I know how to do things. But I think if parents are listening, challenge your therapist. Like, and oftentimes speech therapists, right, they pull their kid back into their office, and parents might not even see really what's happening. But what do we know? Children learn through play, and language moves when we move. So a 30-minute or an hour session just spent sitting at a table, it's not going to get it done. It's really boring, right? And if it's really boring and we're working on these discrete skills like this, kids lose motivation, they're frustrated, and then parents are frustrated because progress is slow.
Yep. I like that. Challenge your therapist. And I think that's great is, ask the therapist, what are you doing with my kid? Are they sitting at a table? Are they moving? Are they sitting on the floor? What's this look like? Can I observe? Like, sometimes that's appropriate, sometimes it's not. But yeah, I definitely think, like you said, parents, they know their children the best. They're the experts on their children. And so they should be asking questions and challenging the therapist to do better if needed.
Well, and I always tell my families too, if I'm not working for you, if we are like working really hard together and we are trying to move forward, but if I'm not working for you, then you have every right to fire me. And my ego is not so big as to say, oh, like, this is all a you problem, right? There can be bad fits. Also, like, if someone expects me to sit at a table and drill, do that kill and drill, that's not my style. And I can't do that. And if that doesn't work for you, that's okay to say we need to part ways. Also, I mean, I want families to feel empowered. And yes, there's wait lists and there's so many things, right? But if it's not working for you and your child, what are we doing?
I agree. Well, that's what Rachel always says, is that we work for the parents. So Fire your therapist if it's not working.
Well, it's a question I get so often too. We get it so often just with this work that we do of like, how do I find a therapist who does X, Y, and Z? Or my therapist, a recent one was my therapist, my kid's been going to OT for 3 months and I've gotten one little worksheet and that's it. Like, how do I proceed with that? I'm like, they work for you. If it's not a good fit, then find someone else or say, this is what I need. You work for me, like in the nicest way. But it's so true. Like, we need to get out of it. We're spending a lot of money on therapy. So we need to make sure that we're getting the most bang for our buck.
Absolutely. Because these families, especially like for our school age families, they're pulling kids from school, right? And we're walking this fine line because these kids are often struggling academically as well. So if I'm going to bring my child to therapy, the bang for my buck, am I getting what I need out of this therapy? And then I think too, as therapists, we walk a fine line as far as, again, with this mom that I had this morning, who I've been seeing her child for 3 months, and suddenly all of these new things were shared this morning. And I'm thinking, this would have informed my therapy differently throughout this path. And so again, that's that issue of trust, or when it pops into a parent's mind as like, I've said something, and it causes that, like, all the cogs to start going and thinking, oh, this is related to this, because they don't know the scope of our field or our fields as well. And so then it's like, okay, well, I think you should see an ENT. I think you should see an allergist. Like, so now I'm giving this laundry list of other recommendations, right? But that family has to trust that what I'm saying, like, I have to make it sound reasonable if I'm going to give a lot of information and a lot of, we need to think about this, other things than just working on R's and L's, for example.
For sure. I think the overarching theme is, trust and trust. Yeah, that was it.
I love it. This has been so fun. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to share your wisdom with us. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I know you have a client here in just a few minutes, I think. Is there anything else you want to add before we let you go?
Well, let's see. Tell me one of your guys' best speech therapy stories.
You already told it.
Oh.
It's not even about me. I mean, if this is coming out in National Speech, Language, and Hearing Month, and I think our field is kind of in disarray right now, from a licensing perspective, some Medicaid reimbursement. There's just a lot of things going on. So I guess, what are your thoughts about speech therapy? What questions do you have about us as a profession that I can either set right or agree with? Yeah.
Honestly, do you have one?
I don't have questions. I would love to see more sensory training geared towards therapists. That's what I would love to see, because I've just seen the benefits of communication when a child is regulated from sensory input, because that's how we regulate, is with sensory input through sensory processing. And then that's when we can access those higher areas of our brain that we need for communication. So I just wish that there were more sensory trainings geared towards therapists, because there's a lot of trainings out there, but I don't know that any of them are necessarily geared towards speech very often.
Agreed. And a lot of that I have learned, well, in having my own children and knowing what we need to survive the day sensory wise, right? But also, like, on the job, just watching and learning and knowing and doing, but no one has really, I've taken trainings where sensory has been part of it. I think parenthood changes a little bit your therapeutic approach, because you're experiencing it firsthand and you don't get to hand the child back to someone else to go deal with it for the rest of the day. But more than that, I do think being able to observe others and learn from others, because I don't think there's a course out there. There's pieces in courses, but not really how you can do this on your own. Like if I was by myself as an individual practitioner, I would be at that table, you know, doing drill. There are not courses out there directly for sensory processing for speech therapists. There's one that I can think of. It's very expensive. But it's not easily, you know, accessible to us who are in the trenches doing the work.
Well, it'll probably be time for you to make one then. I think that's your next venture in your spare time.
All right. Well, Amy, thank you so much for being here. We're going to let you go and see your next kiddo, but we just appreciate you being here with us.
Thanks, Amy. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to All Things Sensory by Harkla.
If you want more information on anything mentioned in the show, head over to harkla.co/podcast to get the show notes.
If you have any follow-up questions, the best place to ask those is in the comments on the show notes, or message us on our Instagram account, which is at harkla_family or at All Things Sensory Podcast. If you just search Harkla, you'll find us there.
Like we mentioned before, our podcast listeners get 10% off their first order at Harkla. Whether it's for one of our digital courses or one of our sensory swings, the discount code SENSORY will get you 10% off. That's SENSORY.
Head to harkla.co/sensory to use that discount code right now.
We are so excited to work together to help create confident kids all over the world. While we make every effort to share correct information, we're still learning.
We will double check all of our facts, but realize that medicine is a constantly changing science and art.
One doctor or therapist may have a different way of doing things from another.
We are simply presenting our views and opinions on how to address common sensory challenges, health-related difficulties, and what we have found to be beneficial that will be as evidence-based as possible.
By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice to treat any medical condition in either yourself or your child.
Consult your child's pediatrician or therapist for any medical issues that he or she may be having.
This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to the podcast.
Thanks so much for listening.